Hey, everybody, welcome back to yet another Gramophone Live. And tonight we are featuring Rega, and with us is our good friend Bryce Allan. So, welcome, Bryce.
Hi there. Hi, Luke. Wonderful to see you again. It's been
You
a wee
too, man.
while indeed.
It has
Um,
been a little while. And for everybody watching, we are going to be doing something really cool tonight. Not only are we going to talk about some of the finest turntables in the world with the foremost expert on the subject, but we're actually going to be giving one of them away. So make sure you stick around because then I'll give away the details on how to get a Rega Planar 1 all for free. And that is a lovely little table. So you definitely want to have a nice shot at that. So, Bryce, man, thanks again for being here. And I'm going to have some questions for you just about
sure.
Rega turntables and the philosophy, the design, everything that goes on with making such a fine instrument. And how about that video? Like the whole theme of that thing was just precision and
Yeah, it
delicacy. Like that was
possibly
definitely.
possibly tells a better story than I do, but at the same time, it saves you the jet plane and the tour because you can kind of see the process and the care that we put into everything that we do. And the other thing that was mentioned earlier was making sure that this is interactive. So in some respects, if there's questions to be asked, don't be afraid to ask them,
Mhm.
because we're here to help, and that's why we're live.
Absolutely. So, with that said, and Bryce, thank you for walking me right into
Yeah,
that. Guys, anyone watching, just ask anything throughout any duration of the stream, and we'll throw it up on screen here and do a best we can to answer it for you. I'm going to have some questions for Bryce that will just walk us right into a great overview of the Rega brand. But
hmm,
anything you're thinking, ask away.
super.
So, Bryce, what I want to start with is just you. Can you tell
Okay.
me about your background in audio and then how you ended up at Rega and your experience through it all?
Yeah, so I started many, many moons ago across the Atlantic in Scotland. I started at a fine retailer, maybe not as a, as wonderful as Gramophone, but I worked in the audio industry and retail for, my goodness, maybe 18 years or so there, and then I decided to flip across the ocean and do something different. So I've now got 27 years or so selling Rega turntables. So I remember, it's crazy in the office. Sometimes I'll be referred to as kind of like Bryce will remember, and then I go into the particular bits. No, oh yeah, that was the way we did it back then. So a little bit of an old head on relatively young shoulders, which isn't a bad thing.
So, how's your experience been since crossing the pond?
It's been interesting. I think my perception was the streets were lined with gold, and that's not necessarily the case, um, because there are some things that are maybe forgotten about. It's maybe cultural rather than anything else. It's not a negative or a positive. It's just really an observation, because it's interesting from my minor views in Scotland. It would be like, oh, surely every wonderful city in America has an amazing hi-fi retailer to visit. And sadly, that's not the case. I wish it was
Mm.
different. But over here, if we were to snap our fingers and jump to Britain, you'd be like, wow, every city has a great store. And that's a bit of a shame that it's not the same over here. But hey, what can you do?
And it looks like we've got a comment here.
Mhm.
Mike says, I've been a happy P3 owner since the 1980s. Thanks, Rega. Well, thank
Yeah,
you, Mike. That is quite brand loyalty right there.
yeah.
And I have no doubt that Rega appreciates that, and so do we, because it is definitely one of our favorites. Isn't that awesome,
Mhm.
Bryce?
Yeah, yeah, it's tremendous. We still see things that are 40 years old coming back to us. Some things we can't really do because some of the bits aren't made anymore. But the geometry and things of a 1980s turntable to today, it's very similar. So we could say, right, if you wanted to do something special to yourself, maybe you should get yourself a new arm and pop it on your wonderful, beloved
Mm.
old friend, and it would work. And that's, it's hard to, I suppose the answer is thinking back to my days in retail, it was hard to think of anything that would last 10 years, let alone nearly 50, which
Oh
is
yeah.
kind of shocking when we pride ourselves on trying to look after the world for our kids. And that's something that you'll see with even the way that we put things together. We try to make it good, and we try to make it serviceable. So it's not all um, it's not all bits and pieces. It's like good things should last, and they'll last a long time if they're put together and engineered that way early rather than the opposite.
Oh, absolutely. Some of my, in this world of just frankly purposefully designed throwaway products, some of my most favorite things are the things that are still truly made to last by people who still believe in that.
Yeah. I mean, I look at, I've got silly phones, and you go, every couple of years I'm throwing this away or
Yeah.
putting it in a drawer. I'd rather have an amazing table and an amazing system and keep it for a long time and then give it to my son. It's that's what I'm politely interested in, and I think
No,
that,
my thoughts exactly.
echoes through what we do.
Mike
Yeah.
also added, I've added an Elex R to my
An
system. That's an
amplifier, yeah,
excellent
wonderful
choice.
little,
The
yeah,
Rega
good,
amps
good
sound
wee.
wonderful.
Mhm.
So, just a little bit more about you, Bryce. You said that you've been doing this quite a while now. What was the
Mhm.
total again?
27 years.
27 years and
So
on.
I'm sure
Man,
I could have
that
got
is
less time in prison for
that's
something,
awesome.
but yeah, that's
You probably could have, but at least audio is a good place to spend 27
that's
years,
right.
huh?
Yeah, people pay me, and it's still a job. That's pretty good. So yeah, I can go over a little bit of the. I suppose my history is one thing, but we can probably cut to the chase and talk about Rega's history and that
Sure
kind of thing.
thing.
50 years old now. So I've only been doing it for half the period that they have, I suppose, which puts it in perspective. And some of the true beliefs of the founders, things like they don't believe in advertising because they reckon that's persuasion and guile. And I
Hmm.
get that. We'd rather put the money back into the products. So rather than, if you can think about 50 years worth of advertising revenue, that's a lot of money that you can put back into the development pot. I suppose the other thing that people forget, or they call us Rega, or not that it really matters, is we're called Rega Research as our proper full title. And we're a
Riga Research.
Rega Research. So there's things that we're learning, and there are even things with magnets that are kind of not unsolvables, but have not been figured out in such a manner that we're researching and figuring out and making things better for the betterment of what we do, which is really well-priced audio equipment. And that goes for all the models in the series. So um, there's nothing that there's an awful lot of argument about, oh, there's a world full of diminishing returns, and I find that really hard to talk about when I'm doing my bit, because I say every wonderful table is the best thing that we can build at the price that we want to build it at. It's just whether or not you want to get there, and really that's where being exposed to it is really the truth. you know
Makes
Sorry,
sense
that
to
was
me.
tangential to the question, but that was important.
Hey, I think it was perfect.
Yeah.
So, just to chat a little bit about turntables in
Mhm.
general, Riga kind of has this new yet also old format to it.
Mhm.
Such and when we just get into the meat and potatoes, if you will, what a turntable is. Okay, what is a plinth? What is a platter? What goes into the design process of these things? And what would you say sets Riga apart from many others who also make spinny discs with needles on the end?
Yeah. So we're looking at it from, we want a high rigidity, low mass device, and you can see that. I've got my tone arm here. I've got bits of turntable all over the place. But yes, we the idea is you want to get the care of, or how we put a turntable together is really the um you want it to spin accurately at the consistent speed. Then you want to place the needle where it needs to be. And last but not least is the stylus itself. So all parts matter, but it's that's the hierarchy of care in how we put things together. And I suppose I could go through the models and talk about each one independently of each other. So the funny thing you'll see from any photographs of any product offerings is they all look pretty similar. Apart from the top ones, they start to lose parts. But the geometry of the turntable is the same. So we don't use funny things like extra long arms and different materials. We use different materials on the tables, but we don't change up our concept per model, because you can imagine we've got an aluminium, a clever cored aluminium tone arm, and that in a lot of cases will be cast and specially cut out in the, granted it's hard to see, but there's obviously it's a tube, and we bore out sections of it differently, so it will have a resonant frequency, but we don't really want it to have, it's not as simple as you just grate an arm and you knock it through. There's tapering and inverse tapering in different parts of it, so it's quite an experience in computer aided design these days. It might look simple, but it's a cast one piece of aluminium, which is pretty clever. And that on the Planner 1, it's a tube because we can't build an arm to that. It's a tube with a head shell attached, and then on a 2, it's an aluminium and RB220 arm, and then on the 3 and the 6, it's an RB330. On the 8, it's an 880, and on the 10, it's a 3000. Now, they're just numbers, but really the geometry of them is the same, but the bearings and the way they're put together is much, much more care is taken on the higher series of models. So if we were to look at the tables in front of you, one's an RP6 on your right, and then on your left, it's a Planner 10. So you'll see the arms are different colors, first and foremost, but the RB3000 is a polished tube. And we do that to actually slightly strengthens it, but it also takes off about 0.7 of a gram of weight, because you're wanting it to be as light as possible, but as strong as possible. So a really, really nerdy fact there, but it's not just a visual cosmetic choice. We make the arm a bit stronger by doing that, and then it's also lighter, which makes it sound better. And the bearings of the arms are much, much better as you roll up, and the care put into them it takes considerably longer to put together a 3000 to an RB330, looking at the two things together. So I can go through plinth materials and platters and things like that as well. I don't know how deeply you want me to delve into that.
Oh,
but
we
I see
will.
some questions, so I was worried
Yes.
that I was missing.
Let's get to Scott's question here, and then
Sure.
we can move on to platters and plinths and all that. Scott asks, is the engineering such that apart from a higher Rega turntable can be used on a lower, such as a P2 platter on a P1 or a P6 on a P3?
We would say that things like arms, you could improve the arm on a turntable, but the fundamental part of the rotation of the thing, I wouldn't necessarily adjust the way, pointing at a turntable that's out of frame, but I would improve upon the arm and move yourself up through that. But I wouldn't necessarily change the drive, even though that's key important to part of the pyramid again. I would almost say to you, rather than do that, I would put money in my proverbial piggy bank to buy the better one than you're at just now, and then give your Planner 2 to your kids, or give it to a pal, because there is a little bit of, what's the purpose of an arm that's now not on a turntable? Probably no purpose at all. So it's kind of a little bit probably against my concept of, well, keep it forever. We 40-year-old turntables can be given to children and children's children.
Yeah.
When you start taking them apart, which you could do, we do have quite a lot of people who are Planner 8 owners who then say, right, I bought a Planner 8 because I like the tri-layer glass platter. It's not technically as good as the ceramic on the 10, but then they say, I want the best arm. So you see the black arm on the frame there? They changed that for the RB3000. So it's a kind of a hybrid between the best two models we make. So it's not impossible to do. And to answer Scott's question, yes, it can be done. I would probably do arms. I'd probably do cartridges, but I wouldn't mess with the motor and the platters and things, to be honest, because that money you should just buy yourself some more records is probably what I would suggest.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
You know, with the arms here, like if you look at the P6 in front of me and then you look at the P10, you can definitely see where the design language is virtually the same in terms of
Correct.
style. But when you go over here, there's something about the arm on the P10, and this is going to sound funny, but you know, factually, I know that this is like as light as a feather or as light as it can possibly be. But
Yep.
just in its finish and in its look, it almost looks like heavy and substantial because you can kind of just see the quality, and that's what you would expect. But then you go to actually put a record on, and it's like, no, that is
Yeah, it's the
featherweight, yet just
strangest of
superb in its
feelings
finish.
when you've got an arm in front of you. Now, this is untidy looking with all the wires hanging out of it, but if you feel the differences, in some respects, I used to do this in Scotland when I was in front of people. I'd say, can I ask you to pick up the arm on the 3? And can I ask you to pick up the arm on the 6? And then, or they'd be like, hang on a minute, they're the same for all intents and purposes. But then you'd say, or an 8 as the better one, and they'd say, yeah, that one feels more true. And we're talking about fractions of a human is an interesting measuring device, but you would know it if you touched it. And that's the thing that nobody can see over a video. Nobody can really see over the web. Is if they were to interact with machine A and machine B, they'd be like, yeah, I can feel the worth in the better model just by the nature of hands-on, to be honest.
Which again, it just I know I've been overusing this phrase, but it makes sense because all of this I can tell it's just a natural engineering.
Yeah,
There's
just
a simplicity to it.
evolve. There's no reason to change. You know, if you're brilliant engineers, and that goes presumably for rocket ships as well as aeroplanes, as well as turntables, you make an amazing concept, or you build the best thing you can, and then you say, how can we make this attainable and affordable? And that's where things like the Naiad project is interesting to look at. We never, I don't think, initially decided that it would be a great thing to sell because it's a very expensive creature. But we learned an amazing amount of things from Naiad, and then we evolved the concepts right down all the way through to the range. So I think the Naiad came first, and then we re-released the Planner 1, and it had learned a lot of tricks from this $50,000 magic thing up here, and we were applying it to like a $600 turntable, and that's really what happens. You know, naming no names, but lots of speaker companies do it. So why don't we think that way too? You know, I get kind of surprised when I see other turntable manufacturers say, we're going to use plastic this time, we're going to use a different length arm, and we're going to use acrylic, and then we're going to use metals. And then the next one out the gate now has carbon fiber, and it has no design scripture. They've almost gone off script, which is something that doesn't make any sense to me from being very pragmatic about it all.
Yeah, usually principles in almost any category of life and including design are to your benefit.
Yeah.
We do have a question here though.
Sure.
What's she shrinking? OG 1992. That's a good name. Loved vinyl since I was a kid. Drifted away, but I've returned after researching. I bought a Planar 3. Good choice. My stand is on carpet and not close to level. Suggestions on what to use or not to use. What do you think, Bryce?
Okay. So the feet on these poor wee things are just a wee given rubber, clever dimply thing, and they're not adjustable at all. I would suggest, if there's a way to, I've seen it myself where I've been at people's houses and I've said, well, I'll just put 4 or 5 business cards under the back foot so it can get up to level. It's honestly, your best friend is like a wee bullseye spirit level that you can pick up from any hardware store or online environment and pop it down on the plinth, because that, and then you can put it on the platter too if you're curious, and then you can then evaluate it and just nudge it up. And I would genuinely use something simplistic and then maybe cut it to shape, because it's level is actually going to be really key. So don't let the level is going to be one of the most important things to your table, because if you're starting with a turntable doing its job kind of off center, it's never going to be perfect. So honestly, for you, it would be worth a wee check to see if there's a way you can get it level, even if it's a case of borrowing some other piece of furniture to help the carpet.
So with the different models in the line, Bryce, when we go from the 1 to the 2 to the 3, sure, and so on and so forth, with each tier, what really are we stepping up to between each one? You did touch on this a little bit, but with more than just the arm, when it comes to the platter, the plinth, the whole works, what are we getting as we ascend?
As we have more funds to invest in the table, that means we can choose different materials to build them with. So, as I pick up a Planner 6 platter from the side, here's a float glass platter. This one's had a unfortunate incident here in the office with a crack in it. But it's designed in such a way that glass is an amazing material for a platter, because you want it to be really stiff as it rotates. But the way that we've done it is we've got 2 pieces and it's got some clever UV bonding, so you can apply the weight to the periphery, so it kind of continues like a gyroscope. So if I was to go through platters specifically, we can say the Planner 2 has a 10 millimeter thick one. A Planner 3 has a 14 millimeter thick one, so it's getting a bit heavier. And then the 6 is dual layer, and then the 8 is tri-layer. So now we've got even thicker. Because mass is important in the world of platters, but not too much. It's a balancing act, because you don't want too much weight on a bearing either. But I can get into that subject matter too. But you want to make sure it's strong where it needs to be and light where it isn't. So platters, you saw from, once we go through the little rotation of photographs here, Platter 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let's talk about that with focus for you, Scott. Here's a platter. And as you can see, this was pretty heavy when I picked up the platter, I should say. This is a plinth of a Planner 6. And as I throw it around the office, there's no weight to it at all, really, because it's a foam core. It's a foam core platter using a material called Tancast, and then it's got a nice trim round it. And then kind of poignant comment to note is here's a brace, and this is phenolic resin, and it basically joins the hub position to where the tone arm is supposed to be screwed into. So this is, as we go through the model range, you'll see the top ones like the 10 and the 8 start to have next to no plinth at all, because plinths are detrimental really to the result that we're trying to get out, which is playing the vinyl the best it should be. So I saw the little question about, would you provide some of the significant differences between the Planner 1, 2, and 3? So I will go into that with a little bit more focus. So the Planner 1 has a phenolic resin platter. So it's not as heavy as the lump of glass that you saw here. Still got a felt mat, because the mat is the isolator to the record itself. The tone arm is called an RB 110, and that's a cylinder of aluminium with a wee plastic head shell adhered to the end, and it's all preset. It's almost designed to be the plug-in and play turntable. $600. You'll probably see me into the grave. It works really well, and it will, you know, I bought a Planner One Plus for my son, so I can kind of talk about, you know, my own experiences. Like, he's just getting into the hobby, want him to not have something rubbishy or a suitcase record player. I'll have him something serious, and he's got a one himself and loves it to bits when he's not playing on his iPad or shouting at kids on computers. But the next step is a 2, and what happens then is the plinth remains, it actually goes to a gloss finish rather than a matte, so a little bit prettier. And then the tone arm goes to an RB220. So this is where you get the aluminium tapered tube, and it's got the same cartridge actually. So that will prove to you that the table makes a difference rather than just the cartridge. You know, honestly, it's still a Rega carbon on the 1 and a Rega carbon on the 2. We've now gone to a glass platter, a felt mat again. They've all got nice dust covers. Some of them are a bit more unusual looking. And then a 3 is when I would argue that people start to get serious into the hobby. So maybe everyone watching already is indirectly a Planner 3 buyer. They just didn't know it yet. But now we've got a better tone arm called an RB330, and it has tighter precision bearings. It has a anti-skate adjustment, which is driven by some magnets, and it has a spring that helps the counterbalance. So it actually has better tracking ability than a 2, because 2s really are relying on gravity. So you see that little knurly thing that's got silver poking out on the right hand side? That's basically a clever spring that allows it to pull itself into the groove with much more accuracy than just the counterbalance alone. And you can see the brace, and you can see the little glass platter there with a mat underneath it. And Planner 3s are about $1,400 with a cartridge these days. So, you know, it's 600, 800, or 775 is 800 in my mind, and then about 1,400 for a 3. So each little step isn't asking for huge sums of money more. We want you to experience it really, and you'll find your level. Because I don't ever want anyone to go to a place and say, I need a 3 because that's what Bryce told me to do. I'd like you to hear a 2 and a 3. Instinctively, you'll probably walk away with a 3 though, just the way it is. And that kind of challenge always continues. So I get used to a 6 now, and I can't really see past it. And you know, an 8 and a 10 would be beautiful. I'm not sure my animals at my house would treat them particularly well, but that's what I really want as an end game table, is a 10 or a future turntable coming out. So I see someone said, is it okay to use an automatic lift when you get the end of a record? I bought a P6 and there is no automatic lift at the end of the album. That is correct. Purely manual. All these wee mechanical things that would happen on auto returns would be detrimental to the goal of getting a tone arm to do its job right. There are some little gadgets that are like almost like springs, and it bumps into them and it lifts the tone arm. So if you're worried about that kind of thing, treat yourself to one of those. Honestly, though, I tend to find myself being interactive with my turntable. Only after too many beers will I fall asleep listening to one side, and it will sit in the run out groove. But that's about, you know, to be honest, it's not going to do any harm. I get it that you're chalking up some errors on a stylus, but even then, I would imagine you'd probably get annoyed with the noise of the run out groove after a little while. So there's no harm. But certainly on some of the big ones, it's hard to put it anywhere. An auto lifter would be hard to place on a Planner 10, I think. So that's that wee one answered. And as we start to get up into phenolic resin, they're all phenolic skin, but as we start to go into 6 to 8 to 10, we go Tancast 8 is the material that the plinths are made out of. the arms are getting better again. So we've now got an RB880 on an 8 and an RB3000 on the 10. But now we knock out all the superfluous stuff on the plinth. So as you've seen with some of the snazzy graphics that have been applied, things like this is just a resonance or problematic for energy hitting it as a surface. And as you know yourself, as you touch the edge of the glass of water on your proverbial table, it will wobble. So you want to have, as you know, it's a stupid thing I've said before, is like the best sounding turntable is no turntable at all. Doesn't make any sense, but that will not, you know, pick up any superfluous energy because it's not there. So we want to get as minimal a structure as possible. So there's a great picture, great cue, experienced team here. So you can see how the feet are at the 12 o'clock position, and then the sort of 8 o'clock and the 4 o'clock position on the table. But everything else is taken away. So we've got a big tri-layer piece of glass turning round. The belts, you see how there's actually 2 belts on this creature. So it allows for any error that was on belt 1 would be medianed out by belt 2. And that means the sum of the two would be a more consistent drivetrain for the table itself. And then the you see the brace there that's still in silver. There's one on the underside too, and even you'll see the cartridge has 3 bolt positions too, because that allows for a triangular mount on a Rega cartridge on a Rega table, which means it's really quite hard to misalign a cartridge on a table if it's one of our cartridges on one of our tables. Hopefully that's a little bit of insight there. I can answer other things, but I don't want to be preaching on at you about all the differences between them. You know, the tighter precision and accuracy tends to come with the better models. So, and more music or better music comes out of all of them. So that's a little bit there. So I'll let you.
With cartridges, though, Bryce. So moving on from like the arms and the
Sure.
plinths and stuff, which it's interesting because prior to talking to you and understanding a little bit better, I'd kind of wondered, okay, by the time I get to a 10, like, why do I have so little plinth? Whereas, like, yeah, there's some other makers of turntables out there. The higher up you go, it's like, well, all you get is more plinth.
That's right. Yeah, high mass things are another way, another idea of how you can build a turntable. There's springs on some. Other people will go for huge lumps of metal and tell you that's good, but you can understand that energy doesn't go away. It generally just transforms and comes back at another frequency. It's generally, you know, it's all back to my high school mathematics or high school physics lessons that I've forgotten half of it. But you know, force is for what is it? I had written it down in my little notepad here for remembering. What is it? Force is mass times
Four forces, maybe.
Yeah, that's right. The aspect of what I tend to find is if you can imagine all of the things that you put together are kind of a mass of compromises. Nothing in this world is perfect. We'll try to get as close as we can with the money and the materials and the engineering and the science behind it. But you things like you know, adding huge mass to things doesn't necessarily make it quieter as a turntable. I think Harvey Lovegrove did a wonderful video where he showed you like a glass of water on a concrete or on a granite work surface, and he's rubbing it with a cloth at the other end of the table, and you can see the energy is being conveyed up to this glass of water. And you would imagine that would mean all the mass would be absorbed by the granite work surface that needed about 6 strong men to lift it, but it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't. So energy, the idea is to not have as much spurious energy in the plinth and not as much spurious energy in the arm, and therefore not as much spurious energy is on the tiny little undulations on the record, which is, after all, what we're trying to listen to. I sometimes find myself going, oh, this is all super technical, but the core here is listening to the record, not really the record player. It should be as clear and as good at doing its job as possible. But don't sweat the small stuff, because generally we have, is probably the best way to talk about that. So do I recommend an aftermarket adjustable feet? Do you think Rega will offer adjustable feet as an accessory? Quick answer to that is probably not, because we want you to get a really awesome surface to put it on. The best suggestion for something like that is, if you have room in your life to put a turntable on a wall, even similarly to place to where you've got it on your piece of furniture, that's probably the most undersung turntable upgrade you can buy. And we do a pretty plain looking, but it's like a box section of steel, and it's folded, and it's got little positions for the feet, so it kind of looks relatively simplistic. But the best upgrade I've heard on almost every turntable I've had the pleasure of working with in Scotland is, when they put it on the wall, it loses the floor bound vibrations and therefore works better as a turntable. So it sounds as crazy as that. If you've got your turntable on a piece of furniture, maybe you should put it on the wall bracket behind said piece of furniture, if you're allowed to, or it meets with everybody else's in the house's approval, and you'll get a better sound out of even the smallest of turntables that we make, because getting rid of the vibration that the floor brings will bring a multitude of benefits.
Hey, that's really cool, and it would look really cool too.
Yeah, it's I've not done it myself yet here in the States, but I did it in Scotland, and it was certainly a betterment to the table when I had one over there over the water. So that's a little bit about
So
that.
with cartridges, I do want to ask you
Sure.
about that now. Rega makes a few of their own. There's a whole lot of different types of
Sure.
cartridges out there. The most commonly known, moving magnet, moving coil, but I've even heard of other more esoteric things in the world as well. With the Rega cartridges, though, can we kind of walk through that line a little bit and just what you see evolve there?
So we have a range of lovely moving magnets that are actually, in the start of the video, you saw a man putting one together, and one of the things you saw him do was a little plopper that was folding up the coils that go into the cartridge itself. So we build moving magnets that are one piece, which is a little bit different than other people. Lots of people put removable styluses into their cartridges, but that's really problematic, because that's a break, and as you can imagine, in a signal chain, the more break or more potential break areas you have, the worse it's actually going to be for results. So we have some wonderfully little moving magnets, starting with the Elise and the Exact, and they're a bright blue one and a bright yellow one. One's about $600 and one's a wee bit less. And then we go into moving coils. And the interesting thing is, a moving coil, we've spent a lot of years researching coils, because there was, the easy way is to find an amazing cartridge maker to make you a wonderful cartridge and get on with it. But we did a lot of research into coil design and how it was all put together, and we invested a lot of great British pounds in machines and the magnifiers. And you saw a little bit early in the video where he was spinning something on a jig, and the little counter was actually something. We were all younger ladies and men earlier in life. That was a counter that we would count into a nightclub with, the little click, 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 click. So there was all the people, and that allows him to accurately count the wines onto that tiny little cross. And how thin that wire is, it's 0.018 of a millimeter. So it's a terribly thin wire. And I remember asking him how many he broke early in his life, and he said, "Oh, most of them I broke." And then later on in another Zoom call to him, I said, "So how many are you breaking now when you're winding that?" He says, "Oh, I'm down to about maybe 2 or 3 in a day that I'm now," because it's a function of carefully winding it onto that cross. You've got to get all the cross sides equal, and then that's the bit that's the generator. So I actually sent through a little video of a calibration, so you can see how a needle is sitting on a calibration tool that we have big magnifiers at the office, so we can see everything's working right. But yeah, the nature of cartridges and what you get for when you spend more is it tends to be a truer representation of the material that you're playing. So it's not a one size fits all. I would argue that you could put a wonderful little cartridge. You could put probably the best cartridge we make on a Planner 3 and be shocked at how good it is. But I would almost say that for the monetarily expenditure in there, I'd rather you moved up the escalation of turntables and put a more modest cartridge on this Planner 8, for example. So it's interesting. The turntable is probably more important to me than I would argue the tires on a car. A cartridge is a consumable. It's really important that you get a good one, but remember that in a couple of years you're probably going to be replacing it. So it's a running cost of wonderful turntables, to be truthful.
Gotcha. And it's interesting to hear that perspective because there are those who have often said, or at least acted like, well, the cartridge is probably the most functional part, so you should probably put the most of your money there.
Mm-hmm.
But here you've been doing this for 27 years, and you say, "Nah, think of that more like the tires."
That's right, yeah, because it will wear down, and yes, a good cartridge, well looked after, can last you up to about 7 to 10 years, because I've done it. So don't get me wrong. You don't. I've had people knock the stylus off, and they've only lasted 3 months. But I've had turntables in good stead and well looked after. You don't need to worry about a good cartridge going wrong on you. You just need to say, well, this is a consumable, and I'm going to be here eventually. So I would almost say, put your money into the heart of the thing, being the turning thing, the tone arm. Make sure the cartridge is perfectly put in the right place, because you're right. Other manufacturers, naming no names, but they might have not cared so much about the structural foundation of what we started with. And they're saying, oh, they're all pretty much as good as one another, but this one's got a super cartridge on it, and this one's got the super extreme cartridge. That's the one you want to buy, because they don't really know that actually if they spent more time at the start, you'd maybe get a better result out of the wee modest one, because the rendering of the music was better.
That walks me right into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, though. So you got your whole table, you've got the cartridge. What would you say in the Rega line are some of the best value combinations for a table with a certain cartridge? Like, what are some of your favorites across different
I think it's tough for me to pick a dead favorite, because I get to play with all these things and buy none of them. But it's a bad answer.
I know that feeling.
It's a bit like you. It's like there's wonderful things in Gramophone. I'm not going to buy most of them, but they're all great. For example, I love the Planner 8 and the Anya Pro. Partly because I am excited about how when you get them together, you get quite a reduction on the price of the two of them. It's the cartridge by itself is about $1,200 and something dollars. So that makes that turntable about $4,500 all told, and that I'd be hard pressed to think of other things from all my years that sounded so good for that little. Which is a bad example. But I would say even listen to a 3 with an Elise, listen to a 3 with an Exact. You'll spoil yourself and you won't be able to buy an Elise anymore, which you can imagine is just the cartridge change. but the way to do it is to set yourself a budget, acknowledge that that's where you want to be, and then listen to that one, and then don't be short-sighted and not listen to the better one. There are no pockets in a shroud, as my mother would remind me. So don't sell yourself short of the pleasure that you're going to have for maybe 40 years at this thing. It's not something you do often, and not saying that we don't want repeat customers, because everybody loves repeat customers, but don't buy a 3 if really your heart's set on a 6. I would say that I know the sales ratio, because the least expensive ones are the ones sold in the most volume, because they're the least expensive, and then it shrinks as we go up. But what was amazing was when the Planner 10 launched, I sold probably 4 Planner 10s to every Planner 8. So it was a radical switch, and I assume lots of those 10 buyers were probably 3 owners just buying the best one, because that's now the best turntable Rega can make. So an interesting metric that I have no great scientific proof of, but I do know because I was the guy taking the orders.
Yeah, it's interesting, because one thing that I've learned is, okay, maybe you don't, using money, be careful. Maybe you don't need to go and buy the absolute best thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also learned the lesson, not only in this hobby, but in general, of like, it's just as regretful or ill-fated to underbuy. Like,
Mm-hmm.
make sure you come in at the right spot.
Yeah, that's right, and that's what you've got some wonderful. I'm fully aware of your experience center coming, and you've got some wonderful places to experience stuff today. You should
Oh
get
yeah.
yourself in front of things, and you'll enjoy it, and you'll find yourself going, "Wow, I didn't think I was going to be here, but that's the one I need to have in my life, and I will keep it for good." And maybe that's a big expenditure. Don't get me wrong, the receipt might be big, but that's it. And you don't need to worry about it. You might see them at the grocery store, but they don't need to buy any more stereo equipment because they're done. And that's okay. I'd rather have lots of customers like that say, yeah, it's the best thing I've ever bought. I want to share it with all my friends, and let's keep going,
And that, I think, hits about all the questions that I was thinking of.
Sure.
Thank you for mentioning the Experience Center, by the way, because I was going to bring that up. For those of you watching, come mid-May, the Gramophone Experience Center in Timonium will be opening, and which will be right next to our existing Timonium showroom. And we're going to have actually this P6 and this P10 on display there, so you will get to, well, experience some pretty fantastic Rega options. So we're definitely looking forward to that. And perfect timing. Pete asks, which turntable in the Rega line would you say would be best for an old school guy who is getting back into the hobby? Ooh, that could be a lot of them.
That is a lot of them. So I hasten to add, I sound like a broken record saying judge for yourself, but I love what a 3 does. I love what a 6 does, but I know what an 8 and a 10 does too. And orders of magnitude more money. But from a results perspective, as long as you've got the right rendering equipment, I'm not going to say for 1 minute, oh, it's got to be this one, but you would listen to it and evaluate it, and then you'll buy the one that your heart tells you should buy, because it's not really driven by price, because that's just a number. And I get it that sounds very blasé of me, but having done this so long, nobody ever comes back and says, I've bought the wrong thing. Everyone comes back and said, I wish I had bought the 7, the Planner 7 when it was a thing,
Yeah.
or it was very true. So even though you might say, I'm not sure how much I want to invest in this, get yourself in front of a 3, then hear a 6, and you're going to go, I'm probably a 6 guy. I just didn't know it. And that's really all that there is to it. I think there's an awful lot of, magazines are quite bad at times to give you all sort of flowery language when you're the better judge than they are typically. I'm not belittling them all, because I do have lots of friends and respect for some of them, but you're a better judge, and they can't hear everything. They don't really know everything. Some of them don't really know some of the engineering care that goes into even the baby things that we do. They're just writing a wee thing and putting a price and putting a star. Doesn't really mean much. I would say that
Mm.
you would experience it and you'd know exactly which one you need to buy, and that's not very difficult to do.
Absolutely. The I say this just on my general YouTube videos for whatever I'm covering. Like, come and see it.
Yeah.
Come and hear it. Come and play with it because nothing's going to inform you more than just actually being there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true.
Oh, there is one more thing.
Sure.
One more that I had was forgetting. And that was briefly I wanted to touch on phono stages,
Sure.
their impact on a system, and of course a couple of Rega phono stages.
Yeah. So phono stages are the bit that makes the tiny little whisper that comes off the cartridge, or an
Hmm.
even smaller whisper in the world of moving coil, and makes it loud enough for an amplifier to hear. So they're as critical a part as the equation as a good turntable. So to the point, sometimes a lot of modern amps are starting to apply phono stages again. Some of them are not very good. Some of them are quite revealing. But we obviously do phono stages, a little one called the Phono Mini, which is a baby moving magnet stage. The Phono MM, which is our moving magnet one. A Phono MC above that, and she's about just under $600. Then we get into the full size Aria, which is a coil and a magnet, and that's a picture as if by magic up on the screen there, and she's about $1,700. And obviously the tables are kind of beholden to the stage you want to use. So with a one, you might actually say, I just want the Phono Mini because it's neat and petite, not very expensive, 280 kind of bucksy stage to go with it. But when you're buying a three, you might want to say, well, now I'm up to a $500 stage, and maybe when I'm at a six, I need an Aria, so that's about a $1,700 stage. They will all function with each other. But the important bit is it's all about scale. I'm not saying that you shouldn't try it, but I know from the engineering of all of them, they're all very carefully done for the monies asked for, and I've always, for all my years, I had lots of other companies courting me about phono stages, and I would always recommend the Rega, regardless of what turntable someone might have walked in under their arm with. It's like, this is great, it'll work forever, and we stand behind them, which is what it's all about. So, we do a big one called the Aura, which is even more
That
sophisticated
thing is
for the
cool.
moving coils. Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, and that's probably what's going in an experience center, but I don't want to guess. So that's quite a beautiful looking thing to behold,
You know what I
and
like
sounds
about
$1 million.
what I like about the Aura, and then some of your integrated amps as well. Though we're not going to really get into those
Yeah.
tonight. You pop the lid on these things and you look inside, and you just see the good principles that you want to see. Big fat copper donut, really good looking caps, clean wiring, sturdy chassis, just
Yeah.
across the board.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's it. It's really simple. If you do it right early, that'll be fine. And it sounds overly simplistic, and I'm sure the boys in England will be very disappointed with me saying that. But it's true. If we do it right, it'll be happy, and it lasts forever. Lasts for a
Generally,
long time.
just simple works. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just does.
Yeah.
And again, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Sometimes people go, "Oh, right, what happens when things go wrong?" And I say, I have one service guy that looks after the entire America. We've two now, one for Cord and one for Riga, but we have one guy who is the guru, a gentleman called Cole that I work with here, and that puts it in perspective. There's not that we have wonderful dealers that look after dealer level things, but then when a dealer struggles, it might need to come back to us here. And that's phenomenal. There's not a fleet of 15 guys sitting in a room with screwdrivers taking things apart. It's one guy going, yeah, that probably needs a board swap. I'll just get a new board from England, and when the Aura needs some TLC, we'll swap the board. It's not that complicated.
We got another question. Maurice says, how big the difference is between the original Aria Phono Stage and the Mark II and Mark III versions?
The main step between those two, between the 2 and the 3, it was really just a cosmetic improvement. So the cards inside are very similar. They might have moved some bits inside. From the original Aria to the Mark II was quite a step, though. I heard them both, and I think it was a little bit of, we'll use slightly different components here, and we'll move them around on the board. I've had the pleasure of hearing them all, and I heard a 1 and a 2, and a 2 was quite an improvement from a 1. I would argue it was harder to hear a step from a 2 to a 3, though, because I think that was mainly casework. Hopefully that was a quick one. That was hopefully you've got a 2, and then that means you don't need to spend any money.
That works. And hey, where are you going to get an answer that honest from somebody who's either repping a product anywhere else? Like, there you go. That's why we love Rega.
That's it. Good stuff. So anybody got anything else, or if there's some super complicated questions, I'm sure we can email them to Luke, who will be very disappointed, look confused, and then email them in echoment to me, and then we can get a good answer.
I'll do what I can, but much like you have the one service guy, I'll then have to defer to you. But yeah, as Bryce said, everybody, we're getting near the end here, but any leftover questions, anything else that you want to ask, we're here for it. So now would be the time, and we'll give you a little minute here. But while I wait on those, let's talk about the giveaway, I promise. So if you want to enter the giveaway for the Rega Planar 1, and yes, you know you do, just head on over to skybygramophone.com and you can find the giveaway link there. And that was really convenient. I did not know that was coming. You can see the little link that just popped up. You can also click that and that'll take you right to it. So either of those options will work out just fine. And let's see, we got any more questions by chance yet? Questions. What do we got?
Generally, that's a good sign. If it's gone really quiet, I've either done a dreadful job of answering the questions, or people are quite happy with their Rega turntable.
Aftermarket adjustable feet, somebody asked about.
Yeah.
Will Rega ever do adjustable feet?
No, I think they'll just stick to their guns. Even it seems really silly, but there's a close-up of a foot. Now, I wonder if it's going to focus on my face rather than the foot. But there's tiny little dimples, I don't know if you can see them, that are actually designed to isolate the table from the plinth above it.
That.
So we understand what's going on, and you obviously need a foot. And on some of them, we put like a trim ring to pretty it up for you. But you can see probably from if I wiggle it the right way, there's little dimples that rise the plinth from the foot itself, because you really want to isolate the idea. The main goal, and I'll try not to throw it around the office this time, is to isolate this from the material beneath it. So it's pretty incredible. I know we've spent a lot of time on things, but even the belts, the little, this is a bright red belt. We don't really do this one anymore, but they're round, and that's designed because you can imagine as you put force into a belt turns because of the very nature of it getting pulled. So if you're going to acknowledge that it's going to do that, you want a belt that rolls so it can be much more consistent rather than a belt that's flat, because that will do the warble, and then that'll increase your wow and flutter just by the nature of it doing it. So that's just weird little things. I can probably go on forever about them, but you'll all be very tired and sleepy and bored of it all. But that's the way of it.
Well, that looks like all the questions then. And thank you, Bryce, for putting so much effort into all of them. I know we appreciate that, and so does everybody watching.
Super. Thank you.
So one more time, don't forget to enter that giveaway. Click that link that's been added and check it out over at skybygramophone.com. And if you want to pick up any other Rega model, we've got a handful listed on Sky. And then for some of the better ones like your P10s and such, come talk to us at the showrooms, and we'd love to be able to show it to you, especially coming next month at the Gramophone Experience Center. So again, Bryce, thanks for hanging out
Yeah,
with me, man.
thank you. Thank you for listening.
Oh, absolutely. So once again, guys, I really hope you enjoyed this iteration of Gramophone Live with Bryce, and we'll be around. So if you have any more questions and you want to pick Bryce's brain a little bit more, he'll be good for it. Just pass those to me, and I'll hand them off to him. And until next time, we'll be seeing you.